In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Kirstin, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful Podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy.
If selling feels hard, you're doing it wrong. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin. Today we're diving into mastering sales conversion, building resilience against burnout, and creating balance while scaling a business. Our guest today is Kirstin Carey, founder of Evolve Sales Consulting. With more than 30 years of experience as a sales conversion coach and entrepreneur, Kirstin has built multiple 6 and 7 figures businesses, both brick-and-mortar and online. After overcoming 2 autoimmune conditions, she discovered that the true success requires resilience and balance alongside growth. Now, as a neuroresilience specialist, she helps high achievers simplify sales, prevent burnout, and achieve sustainable results. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let everyone know with a like, a small review, or even a quick share. Your support helps more people find meaningful content just like this. Let's begin. Miss Kirstin Carey, welcome on the Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's lovely seeing you here, and I can't wait to dive deeper into sort of your life and everything you've been able to do, both basically in brick and mortar and online also. But to kick us off, please tell us more about Evolve Sales Consulting, please.
So I work with coaches, practitioners, consultants, business owners, people with high ticket offers. Typically they're online, to get to a 50% or more conversion rate with their sales calls, so they don't feel pushy and their enrollments feel much more fluid and authentic and easy.
Beautiful. I like it. Nice and concise. And to walk me through, I suppose for you, was selling always something that you really love? Tell me where this first passion basically sort of got ignited.
Yeah, great question. I dated a guy in college who I later married and then later divorced. But he was an entrepreneur and I wanted to help him with his company. So he started a t-shirt company, screen printing company. He is doing legal courier service, and I thought it would be fun to help him. So I started doing the marketing for his company and I would do some of the sales for him. And I was still in my dorm room. So to me, it was just a good time. I didn't realize that I was really good at this. And I was getting a degree in speech communications and a minor in business. And the classes I loved the most were persuasion classes, which are typically what you need to be decent in sales. And I loved everything about it. And it was just fun because it was the psychology of how people think. And I love understanding people and getting to know them and what's driving them. And that's kind of the undercurrent of what really good sales is really getting to know the person that you're talking to and what they're trying to do. And if you can be the bridge to help them from where they are to where they want to be, it's not convincing, it's not forcing. And so right out of college, I started picking up other clients and it was easy for me. And I thought, this is so much fun. I can't believe they're paying me all this money to do it. And then I got paid to be on platforms and speak at large conferences on sales and marketing. And I was really young. I was in my 20s at the time. And I was making a bunch of money doing it. And I was having fun using the skills. And I was constantly reading. And I was obsessed with learning about communications and persuasion. So I was always looking for that. But I also was fortunate in the beginning to have really great mentors who normalized having conversations about money, and they normalized consulting fees, and they normalized charging for things and not feeling guilty or bad about it. So I got a really good education by hanging out with people who were older than I was and just learning from them and just taking their advice and running with it.
Yes, that's beautiful. I always like to say that the best way to close somebody is to let them close themselves. And I think there's huge merits, and we're seeing the market shifting this way for sure.
Yep.
And one thing that was quite, I think, pivotal in your story was very much some of, obviously you share a lot about your personal health journey, right? Sort of the burnout to breakthrough sort of phase, and rewriting basically sales through neuroresilience as well, which is a big concept of yours. I really want, obviously, with your blessings, to get into this sort of period where you were able to overcome basically two autoimmune perhaps diseases, and I suppose tell me about how all of that sort of I suppose this defining moment was when you realized that this was no longer an option, right? Burnout, that's what burnout is. And it was perhaps the cost of your success. How did that reshape your perspective on selling and perhaps business overall?
That's a great question. It changed everything. So, I well in my 20s, I was doing things that people in their 40s and 50s were teaching me, and I was learning. And again, I was getting paid all this money to travel all over the place and speak at these conferences. And I woke up in a hotel room one night, and I was exhausted, and I didn't know where I was when I woke up. I didn't even know which side of the bed to fall off on to go to the bath, like to find the bathroom. Like I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what city I was in. I didn't know if I was home. And I kind of had a little panic attack moment where I had to really come around and look at what was going on. I was really tired all the time. I was traveling so much. The doctors are like, oh, that's just because you've been traveling. And here, take this medication to balance your hormones. Here, take this, or whatever the story was. They were always like medicating. But nobody was asking me questions about, well, what's going on with you personally? What's the stress levels? What's happening? And finally, one doctor asked me what stress like for you. And I said, well, it's no different than normal. And he took that as an acceptable answer. I thought that was an acceptable answer. And then I continued suffering. But there was finally a point where I got diagnosed with celiac disease, which is an autoimmune condition, and then later Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune condition. And it really shut me down. And I had to close my consulting company and stop traveling so much and stop speaking and stop working with clients because it was literally killing. So I went to all these doctors. I even started seeing natural medical professionals, and I wasn't getting answers. It was still like, well, this is how you manage this issue, not how do you get rid of it. So I was like, there has to be an answer. I'm too young to feel this old. There has to be some way to reverse this. So I went back to school for nutrition. I went back to school to become a natural health practitioner. And I became obsessed again, because that's how I do things, and learning how to support my body in a way that it could now undo what I had done to it. So I changed how I ate. I changed how I slept. I changed the amount of water that I was drinking. I changed where I lived. I moved from the East Coast of Philadelphia and Pennsylvania to Arizona. And I got sun. I was a lot calmer, and I got divorced, which was also actually part of my stress, as I was in the wrong relationship trying to force it to work. So I went through a whole transformative process. I opened up a series of gluten-free restaurants and organic restaurants, and I opened up wellness centers, and I built the whole brick-and-mortar piece, and then started consulting people, and I developed a program to teach people how to reverse their own autoimmune conditions. And I did that for 15 years, and it was amazing. And I got to watch people completely transform, who were literally coming to me because they were literally telling me in the sales calls, sobbing in sales calls, saying, I'm trying not to die. Help me. I mean, that was a very different conversation, right? Than let me help you with your business. And I did that for 15 years. My now husband and I built that company together. He's a natural health practitioner too. But after doing that for 15 years and actually supporting other nutritionists and other health practitioners to become business owners as well, I realized the business side of the business was what I loved the most. I mean, I'm a very good practitioner, but I love the business part and really working with people to help them understand what really drives them. And a lot of the people who came to us, they were so sick, they had businesses that they had to let go. So it was a very similar story to what I was used to. So I realized I was attracting a lot of business owners, and I was still kind of on the side helping people with their sales and their marketing and their business, and then helping them heal as well. So I see that to be a combination, especially for business owners, on teaching them the sales process, but also teaching them not how to burn out. Because as an owner, as a high executive, as a high achiever, people learn how to push through when their body has been whispering and then yelling at them that something's wrong. But we kind of celebrate it, especially in North America. We celebrate how exhausted we are and how hard we worked and how little sleep we get and how, we don't have time for anything. And that's not okay. So now I kind of took that back. I've sold off the restaurants and the health part of the company. And I've circled back to being in health, in business health, really, and helping the business owners sell more effectively, sell more authentically, sell more easily without all that tactical trickery of the broy sales where you're just trying to get them to say yes and get the credit card. Feel good about the process, attract the right people, and then also stay healthy while you're doing it. Stay balanced, not burn out.
Right, absolutely. One of my favorite quotes of all time, Kirstin, is Friedrich Nietzsche. He who has a why can bear basically anyhow. And it's interesting because you mentioned that you're an obsessive person, and I love obsessive person. I'm an obsessive person.
Obsessive in the best of ways.
Sure, exactly. Yeah. Obsessing over things that matters for you, right? I suppose. Tell me more about what you think you've been in business for all this time now, obviously achieving great success. What do you think fundamentally at the very core of everything, at the very bottom of everything, what's the why behind it? What do you think?
I am fascinated with how people function and how they think and how we can do things much more naturally without going outside of ourselves to try to figure it out. I mean, the answers are all really within us. And that sounds a little woo-woo for some people, but truly the core of who we are, our bodies know how to heal, are emotionally, mentally, and physically. And if we can get back to the core of who we really are and stop trying to detach from ourselves. I mean, I used to celebrate how good of a compartmentalizer I was. I could separate everything. I could put the stress over here. I could keep going. I'm a former athlete. I was a gymnast for many, many, many years. And you learn how to push past pain emotionally and mentally and physically. And that's a sign from our body telling us that we've gone too far, right? So you can excel at certain things, but at some point your body's going to give in. And that doesn't help business. That doesn't help us thrive. That literally kills us. And so the core is always what's driving that. And so I have a lot of now also education and background and certifications in neuropsychology and neuro resilience. And what helps you become a resilient person, not I go to burnout and then have to claw my way back up, but how can I, with intention and with purpose, build myself to grow and to reach additional levels without hurting myself and suffering in the process. There's going to be challenge. There's going to be toughness that you need to move through. And like at the gym, you can't just keep lifting 5-pound weights and expect to build muscle. You have to eventually build up, but you can't start with the highest weight when you walk into the gym for the first time. But there's a strategy behind that. So you're not injuring yourself and you're not hurting yourself. So I love understanding what's truly driving someone. And a lot of times what drives somebody is a trauma response that got conditioned into them really early on in their childhood that then builds that over time, but then hurts them over time. So I'm really good at getting to the underlying reasons or root causes for mental, physical, emotional challenge that can also help you get further faster if you can learn how to clear that. And move that out of your way. So that's why I think sales is one of the best ways to do that with people, because so many people have hangups and issues about money and asking for the sale and putting themselves out there. And you can find that information quickly when you put somebody into a sales process in front of a prospect, because their wounds and their fears and their stuff shows up in those conversations. And when you get stuck in a sales script and you think the next word has to be perfect, there's a lot going on underneath the surface that I can help people clear out of the way so they can just show up as themselves and the right people just enroll into their programs.
Right. It's interesting you mentioned this. To me, it's sort of healing the hustle, right? This sort of
yes.
And I think that when you think about it, and I think you said it very well. You use your own case study perhaps to discuss the mind-body connections, which we'll definitely dive deeper into afterwards for sure. But not in entrepreneurship, in personal life, and I suppose how chronic stress undermines both performance and quality of life, right?
Absolutely.
It's so huge. And also profitability as a result of that. So you lose on all spectrums in this mindset, like you said, this very Western mindset, let's be honest,
yeah,
of thinking that I was seeing this great example where they were distinguishing Japanese worker to American workers, and Japanese worker actually sleep on sites. They do power naps to be able to recover faster and be basically fully recovering their mental capabilities. While we have people basically that, like you said, brag that they sleep 2 hours a night. So there's a cultural element to all of this for sure. Now, thinking about this though, as an high achiever, we're both high achiever. Most of our audiences are also. How can high achievers perhaps recognize when they cross basically into a harmful threshold of stress, and perhaps what's the first corrective step moving forward?
Oh, that's a great question. See if we can break it down. So I would be willing to bet that most people that are high achievers are already in some level of burnout, that the signs they're looking for are crash signs, like they're being taken out, like they're down for the count kind of thing. Like that's too far. Like that is full on burnout. But some of the things are you're not getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night for whatever reason. I can't sleep. I don't have time to sleep. I feel bad when I am sleeping. I have nightmares, I have panic attacks, whatever the reason is. If you are not successfully every night getting between 7 and 9 hours of sleep, your body isn't getting the opportunity to repair. The second thing I always look at is how much water are you taking in? Not tea, not coffee, not liquid. How much actual water are you taking in? And it should be at least half your body weight in ounces a day. And then if you're drinking something like tea or something with caffeine in it, that's a diuretic. So now if you've taken 8 ounces of tea, you need 8 more ounces of water because it's pushing that through your system too quickly. So I look at sleep and water first for people. And that's actually usually a huge telltale sign that there's something else going wrong. The next thing I look at is how much time they're actually spending connecting with themselves. And it doesn't have to be hours and hours and hours. You don't have to be meditating on a rock on the highest mountain for 4 hours a day. But there has to be a point where there's some downtime. You know, it's not constant. You're not eating over your computer while you're working on something else, while you have something else going on, or in your car while you're listening to a podcast and doing this too, and then driving over. I start looking at how many combinations of things that they're doing, and then also looking at what routines they're in. What do you do the moment you get up? Do you reach for your phone? Do you reach for a glass of water? Do you get into the shower? Like, what do we do? What's a routine for you? And where are the patterns that are serving you and where are the patterns that are not? And I think most people right away go, okay, I know they can right away say, I know there's a pattern that's not serving me. I'm not getting to the gym. I'm not working out. I'm not getting enough water. I'm not getting enough sleep.
Right. No, absolutely. It's very interesting you mention all of this because one thing I've always been a big fan of, I think it was first said by an Austrian psychologist called N. Selye, something around those lines. And he was talking about the fact that truly that it's not the stress that kills us, is how we react to it, perhaps.
Yes.
And I really think that a lot of what you discuss is sort of cells as a nervous system game, right?
Absolutely.
And you sort of reframe it as energetic and I suppose neurobiological when in its essence and its exchange also when you're communicating with somebody else. And to me, it reminds me of when I think it was 17. I did this huge presentation in front of this marketing groups, and it was about the art of connecting and the art of networking, perhaps. And one thing I've discussed was shifting from transactional to transformational. And I think it's something that I think it's huge in any relationship, actually, business or outside, obviously. But I'd really love to have you tell me more about the explorations you're making. It's in obviously pulling out theory and neuroplasticity, and I suppose how do they apply directly to conversion rate? Tell me more. This perhaps. Put some terms, basic terms, to those in which are a little bit less familiar to such concept.
Yeah, let's look at it from this perspective. You have a certain amount of resources available to you. So if we looked at the concept of money, you have $100. And if you need to buy something that is more than $100, you need more resources, you need more money, right? So you have to go out and make more money to go buy that resource, or you have to find that resource that costs less. Your body's doing the same thing all the time. It says, I have this many resources, being able to put towards your health, being able to put towards your mental state, to be able to put towards you getting things done during the day. If you overuse the resources, it has to pull the resources from somewhere else. So, for example, one of the things it'll pull resources from, it literally will pull resources. If you're highly stressed, it'll pull resources out of your bones. So it'll start actually pulling. This is why you see people with osteoporosis and you see people having challenges with bone density. It's because when you are overstressed, your body has to look somewhere to find more resources somewhere. So it starts stealing it from other places in the body. This is where you also see cortisol levels are not proper. You see that your body isn't utilizing nutrients properly. It starts pulling things from other places. So that's when I go back to, how do we rest? How do we repair? How do we get the better use out of the resources that we currently have, so we don't need to steal resources from something else? It's basically just a numbers game at that point. Or how do we strengthen the resources we already have so they go further? So if you have more resources going into a conversation with somebody and you feel more grounded and you feel better about yourself and you are not stressed, your brain isn't on mental fog, and you feel more grounded and happy and your resources are more balanced, that conversation with that person is going to be very different than if you were walking into that conversation with very little sleep, very little water, you're dehydrated, you're stealing resources from other parts of your body. You go into that conversation differently, and the person you're talking to feels that.
Yes.
We are sensory beings. All of the information we're getting is through our senses, and the senses are constantly checking against our past experiences to ask ourselves, am I safe right now or am I not? If you're depleted of resources, your body is actually vibrating at a measurably different rate than when you have full resources. And the people around you are also vibrating off of your vibration, because their body is constantly looking around to say, am I safe? Am I not? What sensory experience am I having that's telling me that I am? So if you are low on resources and I am not, I'm going to be much more alert too to what's going on with you. But if I am really depleted on resources, I'm going to be really worried if I'm near somebody else who's depleted on resources, because neither of us is safe now, and we can feel that vibration, then we vibrate off each other, which sounds crazy, but that's actually how we function as beings.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why you could go into a sales call with the same information as the guy next to you, but the guy next to you is fully resourced and you are not. He will more likely close deals than you will at a way higher rate.
Yeah, mid to long term, you'll lose. Absolutely. Everything is energy. And actually, we always knew this, and sort of forget it and now sort of come back to it. It's very interesting, but we're getting there. We're getting there. I want to sort of dive into it now. So why most people are selling wrong, right? It's a huge topic. And I think that most probably even don't even know it, right? That we have all these conversation about people that actually talk about selling and the art of selling and the straight line system and so many systems and framework that have been put forward over the years. You insist, and I think that's a fantastic point to anchor for this sort of segment, that if sales feels hard, you're doing it wrong. Point blank. All right. Let's just frame it this way. All right. If it is hard, if for anyone that basically remember your last sales calls, it was hard, there's something wrong. So we will perhaps this segment is for you, certainly. And you break down the neuroscience, which we are a big fan of as a company, behind resistance in sales, and I suppose the subtle rewriting, if you will, rewiring needed to align with buyers' psychology. Now, from that perspective, I suppose, what are the most common sales pattern that creates internal resistance or ultimately basically failures that you typically see in the marketplace?
Well, the first thing is thinking there's a magic script. There is no magic script, right? And what works for one salesperson selling the same product as another, it doesn't always work for the other salesperson. We have to pull from their experience and their understanding. And if all salespeople can get into a position of curiosity, which is true questioning of, I want to understand you, they're going to be more successful no matter what they're actually saying, which I know a lot of salespeople are going to be like, that's crazy. You have to have a script. I'm not saying there's no script, but for the most part, if you're worried about the very next word that's coming out of your mouth, or you think there's a magic phrase that's going to get somebody over the side, or you think there's a magic formula, and I've been through a lot of these sales guys and these sales presentations where they get you into a process where you ask them certain questions, so they say yes to all the questions, and then when you get to the 15th one, you ask for the sale because the likelihood it's going to be high, they're going to say yes. That is nonsense. that's nonsense. There's no formula that really works. What really works and what most humans really want at their core self is to feel seen, heard, and understood. When you as a salesperson can get curious about why they're answering the way they are, what's going on, how they're coming to the decision they're coming to, and how they're answering the questions and why they're answering them in that way, your curiosity is going to open up their authenticity. They'll feel safer. They'll feel seen and heard. And then you'll understand more because they will actually reveal more about who they are and understand more of who they are. And then you'll get it. So like I was on a call the other day with a woman who we got through a whole conversation. She had no experience with anything. I was on a team with a company that I do work for. So I jump on their sales team sometimes because I want to keep judging and seeing where they really are versus what their salespeople say is really happening. So I'm on the call with this woman and she had never seen any of the videos, nothing. She'd come in cold at this conversation. So she had no experience at all. So I had to also move through that part of it. But I said to her, I want to understand why this would be the time right now for you to jump into this program. And she said, that's a really good question. And then she stopped and I didn't say anything. And she said, why are you asking me that? And I said, because I want to know what's driving you, because getting into business for yourself, it was a whole program where you get into business and it was a business training program. I said, getting into business for yourself isn't easy. When you have the right support, it absolutely can be a lot easier and you get there faster, but it's no joke to get into business for yourself. And if I don't understand what's moving you and driving you to want to be in business for yourself, I don't feel good about saying this might be the right program for you, because you may not have what you need to be able to move through and become a really good business owner, because your driving force isn't going to get you past the hard stuff. She was like, oh. I said, so I'm not interested in you just getting into this program. I'm interested in you being successful in this program. And if I don't understand what's driving you, then I can't make a good recommendation for you. She was like, oh, like you could see it like sinking in and sinking in and sinking in. And that is a legit reason why I'm asking. But I also want to understand where she may have a hang up later. Because when I get to a sales call, before I make an offer, I need to know where the hangups are going to be. I want to know where they're going to say no. I want to know where their fears are. Because I don't objection handle. Like I've taken a whole classes in objection handling. If you have a lot of objections at the end, you've done something wrong, and I hate to say wrong, but you've missed something in the beginning parts of the sales conversation. Because at the end, it really should be I'm recommending this is for you. We're on the same page. Where's your credit card? It shouldn't be like this, well, let me think about it. And even if it is, I should have seen that coming, right? Or I should have handled that before. So the biggest question is to understand what's driving them. And a lot of times they don't know themselves. So as you ask further questions, they hear themselves saying the things. They hear themselves saying what's so important to them, or they hear themselves saying, you know what, I'm not actually interested enough to move past the hard stuff to do this. And it's a whole different conversation. But most people are lying, and they're not doing it necessarily on purpose, but they're instinctively not telling you all of the answers, or they're hiding things in the conversation because they're afraid of the salespeople. They don't want to get taken. They don't want to do the wrong thing. They don't want to spend money they don't have. They don't feel that everybody's trustworthy. So by asking questions like this, you also show up as the guy who's curious, not convincing. Totally different conversation.
Absolutely. I think that there's this huge shift in the marketplace now from being a service provider to being a resource, to being actually the trustworthy person that people comes to you because of, basically, can be content, can be all sorts of things. But I really think, obviously, you help companies. So you have a B2B offer. And what we've been seeing as an incredible shift is that nowadays over 70% of businesses, basically B2B, transactions, the decision maker actually already made the decisions before entering the sales calls, which that is a huge nugget of information, because we live in a day now where if you do a great job from a marketing perspective and from a positioning perspective, your prospects, in this case, your ideal clients, come to you educated to a point where that conversation has way less objection handling, because they do have the information to perhaps end all their own objections. And I think that there's that's a pivotal moment in how sales occur. We're seeing this with AI, we're seeing this with a bunch of tools, but I'm really wondering fundamentally for you, if it's not a script, it doesn't seem to be a framework. I mean, concretely, if you have to put it basically in words, if you have to paint me a painting perhaps with it, what would it look like to be a great salesperson in a few short sentences?
You understand what's driving them. They understand what's driving them. You understand what got them there in the first place. And you uncover why this, why now? It's my favorite question. Why this, why now? Why this program now? Why not a month from now? Why not a year from now? Why didn't you do this 6 months ago? Like, why are we here in this moment having this conversation? And a lot of times they don't know because they've never verbalized it. And that opens up a lot. So yeah, that's a script, I guess, if you want to say, here's a sentence. But I get to the why this, why now. It may not come out exactly why this, why now. A lot of times it does. But that's what I'm trying to understand. And why are we here? Because then, some people want to leave the call. And I said, okay, I'm just curious, what got you on this call in the first place? Or they give you some reason or excuse to get off the call. And I'm like, hey, I'm just trying to understand because I'm trying to help serve you best. Maybe there's another recommendation I can make that's not this. But why are you here? Like, what brought you here? And they're like, well, and then you hear the fear. I've tried other programs that didn't work. I mean, the barrier to entry to being in business for yourself is so low for so many things. A lot of people now have been burnt by other programs, and they've been burnt by programs that were $5, $10, $15, $50,000, and they didn't get what they thought they were supposed to get from that program. So they're feeling hurt, and they don't trust, but they also still need the solution. So now you're actually running uphill a little bit because other programs have failed or failed them, or they failed in the program because other salespeople let them in when they probably shouldn't have, or they overpromised and then underdelivered. So we're running uphill a little bit as salespeople, I think, from that. Also, we're running up against AI. People are feeling the inauthenticity of some of the stuff that they're seeing and they're feeling right now. So when you can show up in full authenticity as a salesperson in today's market, it's a whole lot easier. So yes, I think some of the marketing is getting better, but in some ways the marketing is so good that people are getting into programs with practitioners and people that shouldn't necessarily be or don't have the qualifications to solve the solutions that they say they've got.
Right. Interesting. So more people being burned, and therefore more perhaps this sort of getting past the past reins, as they like to say, is now sort of significant. I know I love this. I love that perspective. I'll definitely meditate on it. It's very interesting to me because, again, from our perspective and from my perspective as well, I recall basically one time we sat down with our salespeople and we had some type of sales structure. I don't believe in script. I do believe in structure, though. I do believe that basically
there's still a format. Yeah,
exactly. At some point, I mean, there needs to be some guidelines. And we were talking about the structures, and what I tell all my salespeople, and I tell all salespeople actually, is first things first is why. All right, start with why. That's endemic, but I'm not saying that because of that. I'm saying that because, like you said, typically what occurs, especially when you're in marketing or even in sales, one thing that we hear a lot is, well, I want to make more money, right? I want to have more resources, and that is good and all, but we know that all actions are drove by meaning. And therefore, the meaning behind making more money, that's where the money is. That's where the golden mine is. Because sometimes it's, well, I want to pay for my child tuitions. Sometimes it's way more superficial. Sometimes it's, I want to have a better car, right? A bigger and better car. Whatever it is, though, stopping at the simple gathering of resources, I believe, is a huge missed opportunity. One, you know nothing more about this person. Everybody wants to have more resources. So it's very trivial, very surface level. But two, the actual reason why they want to do that is so important to understand who you have in front of you and understand what we call the meaning network, basically the decision-making framework. I think it is so significant, and I believe it's something that we definitely should take more time to diagnose, I suppose.
Yes.
when you're thinking about building seven-figure businesses, now correct me if I'm wrong, I think you did it both in brick and mortar and online, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. So that's fantastic. So you've been obviously, I really want you to, and we'll do a lot of sort of unpacking the myths, I suppose, of scaling and how to maintain integrity and vitality in the process. But I remember a quote of yours. I don't know if it's on your website or maybe some type of podcast that I was able to see, but it was, you don't need to scale your burnout, you need to scale your business, right? And some people think that, again, doing more and more is what they need to scale their business, but actually feeding the burnout, and it's a sort of a spiral, an upward and destructive spiral, right? Now, what systems or ritual perhaps helps you scale without spiraling? Tell me more about how you structure from a business perspective. And let's start online.
Yeah.
It's industry matters in this, but tell me sort of the fundamentals, rules of thumbs that is behind your success, if you could.
Well, I can't tell you that I didn't spiral. So, I mean, there were moments where I did spiral and I absolutely crashed and burned. So actually learning, that's great point, is learning from the spiral moments, learning from the burnout moments, learning when you got taken out or it didn't show up the way you wanted. Because I've built teams multiple times. I had 28 employees at one point for one of the businesses that we had. And there got to be a point where I realized I didn't love managing. I don't love managing people. So I had to find people to do the things that I either didn't have a great skill set in or it sucked the life out of me. So I'm good with people, but I didn't love doing that. And that was taking me away from what I enjoyed the most. So I think one of the things we have to look at as business owners is doing the things that we enjoy the most, still having to do the things that we don't love, but finding the people who are more skilled at doing the things that we're not great at, or it just doesn't light us up. I'm not saying there's still going to be times you're still going to have to do the things, right? But what I learned from the mentors, some of the mentors that I had, is that the success came out of doing the things you hated the most, which I disagree with now completely because it was pulling more resources from me than I was able to give. And then I got back into like being more of a practitioner. So I was hiring people to almost manage me in some cases because I thought, well, I'm the owner, I'm supposed to do all this management. And I'm like, no. So I started training the people who worked for me to learn how to manage me and where my skill sets were and where they weren't. And I hired people to do the things I wasn't highly skilled at, like managing people, managing systems within, because I can only go so far. And then I just want to be on my own and do my own thing. And then, so I actually started getting really good at training people to manage me. Nice. Be my handler.
It's so interesting. It reminds me of Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs. Actually, obviously, Steve Jobs said, I don't hire great people to tell them what to do. I hire great people to tell me what to do. But then Bezos was also talking about this. It was actually a fantastic documentary I saw on Amazon, the whole timeline of Amazon. And he said, it's not a direct quote, but it's basically sort of a thought. He said that the CEO has the simplest job because you have the resources to actually hire for what he's not good at, right? So I'm a big believer in this concept of lane of genius. And I believe that in a world where, like you said, we're all spinning 17 plates, we get to a point where not only we stretch ourselves to 10, I think that's the surface level understanding. It's more about the cost of opportunity to not double down on what you're really good at and what's basically what will really move the needle. And that's where I think where a lot of the busyness come from is most of the time a reluctance, because you typically know what you need to do. Let's be very honest. Also, obviously, people are very intelligent people. Very intelligent. We're decently intelligent people.
Like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah, wait a second.
Not all the people.
Not that intelligent either. But I mean, so that from that perspective, though, to me, it's always amazing to, again, when you focus to a point where, because let's say that you know what to do. Let's just hypothetically go there. From that perspective, the reluctance of doing the actions that you understand you need to do is typically caused by this concept that you were just explaining. This either being afraid of failing, which I think a lot of people suffer from, but also this sort of I suppose the status quo where, well, I'm the owner, so I need to manage.
Yeah.
Who said that? I mean, there's plenty of example of the opposite, right?
Yep.
But we sort of assume this because, again, training and framing and societal pressure and so on. Now, one thing I want to philosophize with you on, if we could, is Dale Carnegie talk about this concept of success is getting what you want, but happiness is wanting what you get, which I think is one of the most phenomenal quote of all time, actually.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? Tell me more about your relationship with such a quote.
Yeah, I think we need to learn how to lean into gratitude. And I think that's where he's going with that quote, is the understanding of how do we appreciate what we have first, and then we can strive for the next thing. Because what I see really, actually, frankly, successful people who feel like they're failing all the time, they don't take the moments to see where they were and then where they are now. And the version of themselves who wishes that they had the thing that they now have that they don't appreciate, that's getting lost somewhere. So I will take clients, and one of the things that I do with clients is I have certain meetings with them. And one of the meetings we have is a look back meeting, where our first meeting is where do we want to be in 6 months, a year, or 3 years? And then there's a moment several months into working with them where we do a look back, where we saw where they were when they first started. And then we also apply it to where they are now. And we get to really talk to the original person who was so excited about getting the things and let her know, look, we've got them. So let's be gracious. Let's be excited. Because sometimes, whether it's health that we were helping people through or their business health that we were helping people through, people forget how bad it was when they no longer have to suffer with whatever that ailment is, business-wise or health-wise. So you don't remember how bad it was until you give yourself a moment to remember, and then to be really excited about where you are now. Because what we end up doing, especially those of us who are really high achievers, we go, okay, great, I've got it. And they move to the next thing before they've gotten the appreciation for getting where they are. And they don't have those moments. And our whole lives are just made up of moments. So if we don't appreciate the moment when we're in it, we don't get the elation. We don't get that dopamine hit. We don't get excited, but we're pushed to the next thing. And then we don't actually see ourselves as successful.
Yes.
So it's those moments that I think are really important, to find that gratitude and actually feel it, because a lot of them can't feel it either. They get it intellectually, but they're not actually physically, sensory experience feeling it. And so I bring my clients into those spaces too.
It's so interesting that you know the look back meaning. It's actually my first time encountering, sort of putting in these words. I think that's phenomenal. Absolutely. I think that we live in a society that is so much based on performance, so much based on what the future look like, that any sort of retrospective, either business or personal, is immensely valuable, because we are in a culture that unfortunately doesn't glorify that. Actually, quite the opposite. Don't look back. You're not going that way, and all these sort of citation we're seeing everywhere. And perhaps if you're a gym bro, sure. But I do believe that there's something a bit more than that, more to life than just this perpetual cycle of let's push and push, basically further and further. And on top of that, let's be honest, but it doesn't work most of the time anyway. So might as well enjoy it along the way. So from that perspective, one thing from an energy level that I want to sort of tie the bow on is very much the difference between convincing and attracting. This concept in which sales is energy. Everything is energy. So therefore, this exchange is energy, and any sales exchange is energy. But I am really wondering, perhaps, what are the first cues that someone is using force rather than in resonance in their sales approach? And I suppose the manifestation of that. You mentioned objection handling, which I think is a big portion of that. But for me, even past that, when you're thinking about how they feel basically themselves performing such an act, have you seen any correlation, any perhaps sort of patterns into how people feel when they are forcing instead of attracting it?
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's like a huge difference between convincing and attracting. Convincing, even physically, you're leaning harder into, like, you're actually leaning into the person when you're talking to them. When you're not trying to convince and you're just allowing them to come to conclusions on their own and you're helping them get there, you tend to be a little bit more back on your heel. Like, you're leaning back a little bit. You're letting them come to you. It's like, if you've ever got into, we have SPCAs out here. We have dog what is the word I'm looking for? Rescues out here. And my husband and I have multiple rescues, and we've only ever really had rescues. And so we've been in a lot of these places. And when you get a dog who's really nervous, you don't want to go right up to the dog and grab it, because out of just fear, it may bite you. Right? When you handle a dog like that, a dog that you have no idea what they've been up against, a lot of times you don't make eye contact, you move near them, you allow them to come to you. Sometimes I will sit on the floor in the room in the corner and let them come over to me. It's a lot slower of a process, but then they create the trust. They tell you what's safe. They tell you that it's okay. I'm still controlling the situation as a whole, but they feel that they're in a safer environment that way. Now, not all of the people coming in your sales calls are going to be terrified little dogs, but you have to think of many of them have been burnt before. They've been injured and they have a problem that needs to be solved. So there is a version of them in this conversation that is in fear. So if you try and convince a dog who's terrified to not be terrified, or talk a 3-year-old off a ledge who's having a meltdown, you can't intellectualize that for them. They're not coming at conscious place. Most of the people on these calls aren't either. Though they think they're talking to you logically, they're actually communicating with you emotionally, and they're trying to hide some of them. But the emotions are what's really driving you. So if you're in a conversation with somebody where you're trying to convince, you're going to try and drag them over the line. It's like dealing with that dog who's terrified. You're going to try and pull them to be nice to you. You're going to try and convince them it's okay and you're safe. You can't convince somebody of that. You have to allow it to organically happen. That's what allowing does. It lets them come to the conclusions. So a lot of times I'll see salespeople in a lot of convincing where they're making statements. Everything they say ends in a period. Most of what you say should end in a question mark.
Right.
Even when you know the answer to the question, they need to catch up to where you are. Asking the question and let them come to the conclusion, and having them say the answer rather than you tell them the answer, totally different. So like I'll ask people, why this, why now? I know why this, why now. I could tell them all day long why this, why now, because they're never going to get where they want to go if they don't start right now, and all the things and all the stuff and all the reasons they're going to lose or win and all the. But if they say why, I say that why this, why now, and they say, well, because if I wait any longer, it's going to be too late. I'm like, well, why is it too late? Well, it's going to be too late because my daughter's already going to graduate from school. My kids will never really see me step up for myself, whatever that is. And then and then you say, well, why else? Because now you're really curious and they need to hear it. And then they're like, well, because if my daughter never sees me stepping up for myself, then what kind of mother have I ever been? And then they're now coming to these conclusions in the moment. They're not coming with this answer. Right? So when you're convincing, you're telling them, you're leading it. When you're attracting, they're answering, they're leaning in.
Right.
It's a whole different conversation. The vibration is completely different.
It is. It's very interesting. You just mentioned mother, perhaps. Something you talk quite a bit about is the gendered experience, perhaps, of burnout and sales. And I actually found that quite funny quote, which is, women are not small men, right? So we need to sell and lead differently. And by the way, I say this about children's. Children's are not basically small adult. They're children's. It's two very different things.
They're very different.
And, I'm not a dad yet, but I just know this from intrinsically. And but from that perspective, you obviously work with a lot of high achieving women, basically that are entrepreneurs, founders, and they experience burnout differently. And I suppose their nervous systems also requires tailored support in high performance basically spaces. Now, how does your approach to neuroresilience shift basically when working with female founders? Is it something that are you consciously basically changing it from a neuroresilient perspective, or tell me more about just how different it is, all things consider?
That is a great question. Nobody's ever asked me the specifics before, but I actually have answers for it. So I don't think I instinctively do a lot of this stuff. So I have to break down a lot of the processes that I use for people who don't instinctively do things like this, but I can teach them how to find their instinct. With women, we're more cyclical. I mean, literally, our bodies cycle through, whether we are still cycling or not, our bodies actually move towards a cycle. So with women, I also work with them on understanding more of a cycle of there's going to be times of the month, literally, that you're going to have more energy and more resources differently within your body and in your brain. We function differently depending on where we are in that cycle. So I teach that process, and I taught that process when I was working with people in the health space. When people understand that as a whole, they can lean in during the times when they have the most resources, and they can lean away a little bit and not feel guilty for it. That's the other thing. Women feel bad about not being all the things to all the people all of the time. So they kind of have to learn that. And
Sure.
For women that are listening to this, there's a reason it's called the moon cycle. Like, we literally still are impacted by where the moon is in its phase. And I know some people are like, oh, that's crazy, that's weird. It's a literal thing.
It is, yeah.
For the women, please to pay attention to that. For the men, they tend to be more, just as a general rule, more consistent across the board. They don't cycle quite the same way for the same reasons. However, around the same time, so depending on how old my clients are too, I start to watch for certain things. Because for men and women, right around the 40, 45 is when we start to see a shift going on in their hormonal production and the way their body functions. So what worked for you at 30 will burn you out by 40 or 45 because we have different resources at that point. It's not necessarily bad or good. So what worked for you in your 30s that you were getting away with in some cases will not allow you to get away with it in 40s or 50s. So you will still see like a shift in hormones for men and women at that point in time. So I also pay attention to that. How old are my clients? What are they dealing with just from a biological standpoint right now? And how do we help them utilize the resources they have and be more resilient at that point? So with that, it's no longer a gender issue. It's more of a, I want to see what age I'm dealing with, because that changes things. I know after I turned 50, everything that was really important to me also shifted too. So there's just a shift in how we view the universe. So it's more age for that. But women tend to be more with my clients than men. But men, I can speak. I was going to say speak man, but I can lean more into the masculine energy when I'm leaning in with a lot of my clients. But I also to teach them sometimes how to kind of not be so aggressive depending on who their market is.
Yes. And I think temperaments is a huge thing. And I think that truly just a societal, basically side note, reading people through temperaments instead of gender, I mean, is much more efficient. All right. There's women that have there's masculine temperaments, and there's men that have feminine temperaments, and then that will definitely affect basically who they are, and that will define them ultimately, not only from an energy perspective, but from a being perspective.
Yeah, and who you attract and why.
No, exactly. And how comfortable you are with basically who attracting why also. Now, from that perspective, one thing that I want to sort of definitely sort of end on is certainly this concept of how to rebuild trust after a sales breakdown. All right. It will happen. Obviously, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to spoil it to you. It will happen. No, it will happen. It's okay. Maybe it's a failed launch. Maybe it's a misaligned offer, right? But it doesn't really. It's not that it really doesn't matter. Actually, it does matter because there's huge virtues and typically huge benefit from an educational perspective that you can gather out basically coming out of them. But you teach how to recalibrate and rebuild trust and come back stronger, perhaps, which I think is it's quite lovely. I don't know if it's a biblical, perhaps, biblical virtue for you, but it sounds very similar. And both perhaps internally, but also with your audience, right? Now, what advice do you give to clients, partners, or friends, whoever they are actually, that experience a confidence-shattering moment in business and hopefully build upon that to, again, come back stronger?
Well, one is taking the moment to see that it was something you needed to learn from. So no matter what happens from that point forward, you get to look at that and say, there was a reason this moment was created for me in my journey, because I'm supposed to learn something from this. So I called this moment in to learn. And either you choose to learn the lesson or you choose to learn it again and again. And I've learned lessons more than once before, so I'm not perfect. But also then just understanding what can you do about it? Like, here's a great example. I had a client who we were working together. She was one of those clients that were like dream clients. She showed up for everything. She did all the things we asked her to do. She was getting amazing results. She was telling everybody she ever knew about it. And then she disappeared. Like she wasn't showing up all of a sudden. I'm like, what happened to her? So I reached out to her. I got silence. I reached out again. I had one of my other the practitioners who worked for me reach out to her. And she came back and she said, I'm really upset. And I feel like I've been hurt in this program. And I was like shocked. So I said, would you be open to having a conversation with me? I'm really curious and I want to learn what happened. And took her a couple of days. She finally got back to me. We set up an appointment. I had no idea like what could have happened. So I get on the call with her and she just launches into this whole thing about how we really didn't care about her and we were after her money. And I was like, what is happening right now? But I said nothing. I nodded and I listened and she continued to talk and I said, what else? And she continued and I said, okay, what else? And then she goes, and you forgot my birthday. And I said, I am so sorry. Now, we used to celebrate clients' birthdays. Like on the birthday, we would have this big celebration and all the things. And she said, you forgot my birthday. And it was, honestly, it was a software shift issue. We changed from one software to another. We had an assistant that left at the same time and not all the birthdays got transferred. But there's a backstory with her about her parents not remembering her birthday as a kid. And it was a huge wound, right? We stepped on it big. And from that point, her wounded version of herself was looking for all the proof that we weren't who we said we were.
Exactly.
Right? So she found evidence because of the way she was looking for it. And then she just compiled, but then she never said anything, right? So we didn't have the opportunity. But now she was saying stuff. She basically went on and just lambasted me for 20 minutes. And I just said, okay. And the whole time I was breathing, thinking, this isn't really about me. And this is giving me an opportunity to not only save this relationship if it's possible, but also understand more about her to help her in her healing journey. I just happened to be the catalyst in the moment. So she continued on and I said, okay. And then this is a question I learned when I owned restaurants, because you could always get somebody on a table who was going to complain about something. This is a question I learned really quick is, what can I do is there anything I can do right now to make this better? Is there anything? And if they're like, no, and I'm like, okay, then I'm not even going to offer the things. I'm like, okay, I'm really sorry this isn't. And obviously we're not going to be able to end as friends. And that's a shame. Let me know if you think of anything. And it disarms people, because most of the time people would just want to be yelling at you because they're upset. Most people don't care enough to even say that. They just start throwing gift certificates or something at them. And it's like, I don't feel heard is what they're really saying underneath. But when they say yes, I say, what is it? What can I do right now? Is there anything? And then they go, oh, because now the little wounded child in them who wanted to be heard is being heard. She's asking to say more. And so this client said, yeah, I want you to not to forget my birthday. And I said, I will do everything I can not to forget your birthday moving forward. And I said, what else can I do? And she said, well, can I make up the month and a half that I disappeared? Can I make that up? And I said, how about I tack that on to the end of your program and we extend it by 6 weeks? And she was like, yeah, that'll help. And I said, how about I add another one-on-one with me so that we can make sure this is cleared and also understand where this really came from? And she said, yes. And I said, okay, is there anything else? And she said, no. And I said, is there anything else you need to say to me? And she was like, no. I said, do you feel that I handled this the best that possible? And she said, yes. And I said, is there anything else I could do right now that would help you feel like this was, like I was serious about this? And she's like, no. Okay, so you feel clear, I feel clear. Yes. Okay. She then ended up not only staying on as a client for another year after that, she ended up becoming one of my practitioners that worked for me for years.
Wow. No, in the middle of difficulties lies opportunities, right? That's and I think that's I think it's very, very lovely. I think that some of my best relationship, professional relationship, personal relationship, emerge out of completely sort of out of this world, basically, experiences. And sometimes one of my, actually, I consider my only best friend, the first conversation we had, zero alignment. He thought I was a jackass. I thought he wasn't interesting. Everything was sort of all powerful. But then you sit down, you're, again, integrity. You show up, you're the adult. You say, you know what, look, There's some type of a flaw here. It might be my fault, might be even yours, but you know what? Let's just talk about it. Let's clarify it. And let's do what's the greatest move currently on the chessboard, right? We can't change the past. The past happened. Now we have this position, right? I'm a chess player. That's why I use that example. What's the best chess move that we have currently on the table? Let's make that. Let's move forward. And perhaps
is there an opportunity to repair this is the first thing. And if the other person is not interested in repairing anything, then you have a choice to make. Like I've had that in the restaurant. I had a woman who lost her freaking mind on my staff because they didn't put the blueberries on the side of the pancake for her kid. They put them in the pancake. She ordered blueberry pancakes. She didn't say put them on the side. And her kid had a meltdown because he didn't want his pancakes with blueberries on them. He wanted his blueberries on the side. So she took it out on my team. And I got involved and I was like, okay, she was screaming. I mean, she was losing her mind. She clearly was, there was something else happening. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And it got to the point where, she wasn't. And I finally said to her, I said, we both know this is not about the blueberries. And she was like, and it shut her down. She didn't know what else to say. And I said, how about this? I'm going to refund you and you can leave and we never have to see each other again. And she was like, and she left. And thing is, that did more for my staff.
Yes.
Because they saw me back them, but they also saw me back them in a way that was still in integrity to the restaurant, but also to her. I wasn't calling her names. I wasn't responding in the same way. I was just like, we both know what this is not about blueberries. So it became a term in my kitchens. This is not about the blueberries. Like people knew what it meant. And so you can do certain things where you still hold your integrity and you hold boundaries and you hold the line. I will do that with people who are asking for too much as well. Like, well, then give me this and then I'll apply today. And I'm like, I don't need your money like that. You don't get to bully me around either. But you hold the line, but you do it in a way where you also support the people who are really important to you. And you don't let customers or you don't let people treat you the way they shouldn't be treating you. So it's still just getting curious. Like, what's this about? Can we solve this? Are you interested in solving this? Because if you are, I'm in. If you're not, then that's cool. We can be done
I'm
with
out
this
as
conversation.
Well. Right.
Yeah, we're out. We're good.
Exactly. We're both out or we're both in. That's alignment. That seems like alignment to me.
Yeah.
You said, Kirstin, the future of sell is somatic. What role will somatic intelligence play in the next era of entrepreneurships and selling? First of all, please define somatic for some that might be not heard of it, and then perhaps lead us through with your response on that.
So my version of the somatics is the body version. It's the feeling, it's the body, it's the movement part of this. So somatic healing usually involves some sort of movement, breath work, something that's taking you into your body and allowing you to release whatever the block is. Because when we have a trauma that occurs, our body decides we're in a dangerous situation. That's what it is. The question is, if you hold on to the trauma or you don't, is whether you've completed the trauma cycle or not. When it becomes a trauma, it's because we've stopped the trauma cycle and we've held on to the trauma. We don't release it. So if you've ever seen a dog just shake, they're releasing something and not letting it get stuck in the body. But if it gets stuck in the body, it literally gets into your cells and your tissues and becomes a trauma. That's what PTSD is, post-traumatic stress disorder. We remember something, we live it all over again when we're triggered into it. That's not completing a trauma cycle. One of the ways to do that is to get movement back and allow your body to release that trauma from the cells, from the tissue. There's many different ways to do it. I have a bunch of certifications in it. There's specific breathwork experiences that I do with people. There's movement experiences I do with people to release the trauma and complete the cycle. So if you are disconnected from your body and you think you can think your way through everything and you don't, you totally discount the fact that your body's involved, you're probably creating trauma moments, maybe little ones or big ones. It doesn't matter. They stack. And then you have a triggered moment, or you're afraid to have conversations about money with clients, or you're afraid you need them to like you the whole time. So you're trying to do all the things to get them to like you and not doing the things in the sales conversation to actually get to understand who they are. It's different. You said from the beginning, transactional versus transformational. When we get into a transactional space, it's usually because we're disconnected from who we really are and what's driving us. We're not being transformational. We're not transforming past those moments of trauma and releasing them to get to the next level of growth. We're trying to stay transactional. We need somebody to like us in order to feel love. We need somebody to like us and give us money in order to feel accomplished. That's transactional. we shouldn't be transactional in our sales conversations. We should be transformative. This person's looking to be from where they are now to where they want to go. They want to transform. They want to bridge their way to something different. If we stay transactional, they typically won't get that transformative experience. And what you're selling them is really should be a transformative, you're different now than you were when you came to me experience.
The body keep the score.
It's on my shelf. I recommend it daily to people. Like literally 3 days in a row, I've recommended that book. I am a big fan. If you have not read that book, especially if you're a practitioner, you need to read it. Vanderkolk.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Bessel van der Kolk.
Yeah.
We're probably butchering the pronunciation, by the way, but you'll find it.
I'm sure I'm crushing it. And then have you read Outwitting the Devil? This one also, I recommend this one.
Napoleon Hill. I read my first Napoleon Hill book when I was 13, Think and Grow Rich. Then I was Outwitting the Devil, second. And I also read the How to Really Think and Grow Rich, which is an adaptation, modern adaptation of it, which I also recommend. But all things considered, Kirstin Carey, thank you so much for being on the Meaningful Podcast. It was such a pleasure to have you on, and thank you for your passions and your straightforwardness. It was extremely appreciated, and we would love if you could share some last words of wisdom with our audience, please.
In any conversation, if you want to come together and understand somebody, ask questions and get curious. Throw yourself into the mindset of like a 4-year-old. You've ever had a 4-year-old near you? There was but why? Well, why? Well, why? Because they really want to understand and know. Get into that space, and sales is going to become a whole different experience for you.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.